Now it's going. Okay. I want y'all to go to the end of chapter 2. Okay. I know y'all finished chapter 2 last night, right? Did you? Look into my eyes. Tell me the truth. Claire, you did? Okay. Christian? All right. You got to catch up, okay? So chapter 2, we've got Hester Prynne, who is on the scaffold. How long is she going to have to be up there?
3 hours.
3 hours, y'all. Holding that baby. And, even though it's a small child, it's still going to get heavy after 3 hours, right? Not only that, but she's like wearing the weight of that letter and the shame that it brings and all the weight of the judgment that's coming from out in the crowd, okay? All right, so go to the last page of chapter 2, and I want you to just listen to this little section, and then I'll get y'all to highlight some stuff as I read, okay? So let me see if I can find it. Hang on. All right, so just listen to this part. I thought it was interesting, but I don't feel like you really have to find it. It's kind of hard to find anyway. But here she is on the scaffold, and Hawthorne tells us the unhappy culprit, that's her, the unhappy culprit sustained herself as best a woman might under the heavy weight of 1,000 unrelenting eyes. Oh, well, you don't have to mark this. It's in the middle of chapter 2, okay? So just listen. If there are 1,000 eyes looking at her, we're talking about 500 people, y'all. That's a lot of people. And all they're doing is like staring, and they're unrelenting in their stare. And it says, they all fastened upon her. It was almost intolerable to be borne. So when she walked out in the sunlight and the town beadle had his hand on her shoulder and like guides her out right over the threshold, she repels him, which tells us that she does have this kind of strength and this stubborn quality to her, okay? But what's going on inside is, that she's crumbling. She is looking out at all these people who used to be friendly, and now they're just judging her, right? Well, probably like we would if it happened to us, she stands there long enough to start thinking, why am I here? Like, how did I get here? What did I do to lead me to this spot, this place right now? So she starts thinking about her childhood, and she starts thinking about like the last few years as a young woman, okay? So in the middle of, not the last paragraph, but the next to last paragraph of the chapter, you're going to have to find it. It's kind of in the middle, so it's not easy for me to, tell you. But look for a sentence that starts, there she beheld another countenance. Okay, last page, next to last paragraph, in the middle. Tell me when you find it so I can move on. There she beheld another countenance. Are we there? Yes? Okay. So countenance means face. Now, she's thinking about her past. And in her memory, she sees this face, right? It's a man well stricken in years. You probably want to highlight this, by the way. A man well stricken in years, a pale, thin, scholar-like visage, that means face as well, with eyes dim and bleared by the lamplight that had served them to pore over books. Yet those same bleared optics, eyes, had a strange penetrating power when it was their owner's purpose to read the human soul. Okay, so whoever this guy is that she remembers from her past, he is thin, he is a scholar, he's older, and he's got these eyes that like seem to penetrate your soul if he looks at you, right? So that's kind of spooky. This figure of the study in the cloister, as Hester Prynne's womanly fancy failed not to recall, was slightly deformed, highlight that, was slightly deformed with the left shoulder a trifle higher than the right. Okay, now, so she's thought about the people who've meant the most to her in her life, her parents, and then this guy from her past. Who do you suspect that might be? This is her husband. Now, he has sent her ahead, okay, and he is supposed to then come along, but it's been 2 years and he has not shown up in Boston, right? Okay, chapter 3, second paragraph. So in chapter 3, we have a recognition. We have an Indian guide who has a stranger with him, and this is the stranger, okay? He was small in stature. What does that mean?
Short.
He's short, yeah. He was small in stature with a furrowed visage, that means face, which as yet could hardly be termed aged. So he's older, but not like old, okay? There was a remarkable intelligence in his features, as of a person who had so cultivated his mental part that could not fail to mold the physical to itself. Skipping just a bit. Although by a seemingly careless arrangement of his garb, he had endeavored to conceal or abate the peculiarity, it was sufficiently evident to Hester Prynne that one of this man's shoulders rose higher than the other. Again, at the first instant of perceiving that thin visage and slight deformity, she pressed her infant to her bosom with such a force that the poor babe uttered another cry of pain. Uh-oh. Here's a chapter called The Recognition. And as Hester shifts from thinking about her old husband, she looks out into the crowd and what? Sees him. He has come into town on the day that she is standing on the scaffold holding a child that is not his. Okay? And she's clearly worried and a little scared because she clutches the child closer. Okay? Well, he's going to come into town. Again, the people aren't going to be able to recognize him because he's never been there. All right? But she recognizes him. He recognizes her too. And he's going to start asking questions. He is not going to run up on stage and start fussing at her, like, whose baby is this? What have you been doing? I mean, that is not his style. He is going to keep I'm not going to say low profile because he actually takes on a different identity. But he's going to keep his true identity secret. He's going to make her promise to as well. Because remember, he's got the eyes that can penetrate into a soul, if needed. So he's going to make it his mission to find out what so many people already want to know. And what's that? Who's the father? But for him, it's personal. Okay? So here he is looking at his wife and trying to figure out what happened exactly, but asking as a stranger would, okay? Now, go ahead about 6 pages. And again, I don't have the kind of time or energy for that matter to read all the stuff to you and explain. You're going to have to get some of this just flat on your own. So this is the kind of book, guys, you got to take a little at a time. You cannot read it when you're sleepy. Okay? You cannot read more than a chapter at a time. I mean, you can, but it's difficult. This is not going to be everybody's favorite book. I get that, okay? But it is incredibly important. There are references to this book all around you all the time. Now, you'll pick them up. You'll see that, okay? But you got to take it a little at a time. And you've got a quiz over the first 6 chapters when? Next Wednesday, okay? So you got the time to do it, bless you. Especially since I'm not giving you other homework in the meantime. So this is your homework, okay? All right. So look for a paragraph that starts, "Good Master Dimsdale said he." And then when you find it, give me a page number because somebody else may have your book.
Mine's on 60.
Okay, in the gray book it's on 60.
52.
52 in the book that I've got lots of copies of. What? 62. 62. Anybody else? We are in chapter 3, kind of in the middle. Okay? Look for a paragraph that starts, "Good Master Dimsdale." Which book do you have? Oh, yeah. I don't know if anybody else has got that one. That's the other thing about these books. There's so many different, copies of the book, so it makes it challenging. All right, so Good Master Dimmesdale. Now, backstory. Because you haven't read this chapter yet. I didn't ask you to, so I get that, okay? You're going to have to go in and fill in the blanks. But she's on the scaffold. Her husband is among the 500 or so out there in the crowd, okay? But behind her, there are dignitaries that are standing on a balcony, literally looking down at her, and the other people too, right? One of them is the governor of the colony, because this is kind of a big deal, so he's there. And the other two are ministers. One's older, one's younger. Well, the younger one is her minister. He's the one that is in charge of her soul, okay? So the other two guys are like, she's your responsibility, you question her. And they're going to make another effort at getting a name out of her. Good Master Dimmesdale, said he, the older minister, the responsibility of this woman's soul lies greatly with you, and it behooves you to exhort her to repentance. Exhort means urge. And to confession as a proof and consequence thereof. The directness of this appeal drew the eyes of the whole crowd on Reverend Mr. Dimmesdale. Now, he's going to be described, and you need to highlight this, okay? Reverend Mr. Dimmesdale was a young clergyman who had come from one of the great English universities, so he's really smart, bringing all the learning of the age into our wild forest land. His eloquence and religious fervor had already given the earnest of high eminence in his profession. So he's really good at what he does, very well respected, okay? He was a person of very striking aspect, with a white, lofty, impending brow, large brown, melancholy eyes, and a mouth which, unless he forcibly held it shut, was apt to be tremulous. That's kind of weird, okay? So he's striking. What does it mean if we say someone is striking in appearance? He's attractive, he's good looking, he's handsome. He's got these big brown eyes, okay? But he's kind of nervous. Like, he's kind of got this nervous personality. And one of his little tics is that his mouth seems to almost tremble. Okay? Now, I'm going to skip down about a paragraph and a half. Look for speak to the woman, my brother. Do y'all see it? Yes, yes? Okay, good. Speak to the woman, my brother, said Mr. Wilson. It is of moment to her soul, and therefore, as the worshipful governor says, momentous to thine own, in whose charge hers is. Exhort her to confess the truth. So, do y'all remember in the crucible when Reverend Hale goes back to the court to try to get people to lie to save their lives? And he says, I'm here to do the devil's work, to try to get Christians to lie. Do you remember that? He feels responsible not only for their lives because he had a part of their, execution, but also their souls. Well, that's the same thing. She is she's a member of your flock. You're responsible for her soul. So you got to stand up and question her and get her to confess, okay? The Reverend Mr. Dimmesdale bent his head in silent prayers, it seemed, and came forward. Hester Prynne, said he, highlight all this, y'all. Leaning over the balcony and looking down steadfastly into her eyes, thou hearest what this good man says, and seest the accountability under which I labor. In other words, I have to question you. You see that they're asking me to do this, right? If thou feelest it to be for thy soul's peace, and that thy earthly punishment will thereby be made more effectual to salvation, I charge thee to speak out the name of thy fellow sinner and fellow sufferer. Be not silent from any mistaken pity and tenderness for him, for believe me, Hester, though he were to step down from a high place and stand there beside thee on thy pedestal of shame, yet better were it so than to hide a guilty heart through life. What can thy silence do for him except to tempt him, compel him, as it were, to add hypocrisy to sin? Okay, let's unpack that. That's a lot. He says, Don't feel sorry for him. Don't think you're doing him a favor. If you fail to tell who your partner in sin is, it may make things worse for him. Because instead of just being an adulterer, he will also become what? A hypocrite. Good, Josh. Because whoever her partner in sin is living a lie. He says that is going to make things worse, harder on him. And then he says, highlight this too, heaven hath granted thee an open ignominy. Ignominy means shame. Okay, got to know that word. It's all over this book. That thereby thou mayest work out an open triumph over the evil within thee, and the sorrow without. Take heed how thou deniest to him, highlight this, who perchance hath not the courage to grasp it for himself, the bitter but wholesome cup that is now presented to thy lips. He says, maybe, well, first of all, he says, your sin is worn where? And where is her sin worn? Literally. On her chest. Like it's out there in the open. And he says, you have a sin out in the open. That's going to give you a better chance to get redemption. To not live with all that guilt. Does that make sense? Then he says, maybe your partner in sin lacks the courage to come forward. So in other words, maybe he is what? What do we call that? When you maybe he's a coward. It's a really interesting argument. Now, she is going to look at him and just shake her head. Not going to do it. This really gets on the nerves of the dignitaries up there on the stage, okay? In fact, the older reverend says, and I'm skipping, you don't have to find this, but he says, speak out the name, that and thy repentance may avail to take the scarlet letter off thy breast. So he says, you give us a name, and what? Yeah, we'll peel that letter off right now. We wouldn't have a very long book. Okay? She says never. So skim through. Is that light killing you? Because it looks like it's really painful. No, okay, y'all just kind of maybe, because I can't reach it to fix it. Now, Bella, you're tall. You might be able to reach it and fix it over there. Or y'all can just kind of he says, or she says rather, never, replied Hester Prynne, looking not at Mr. Wilson, but at the deep troubled eyes of the younger clergyman. It is too deeply branded. You cannot take it off. And would that I might endure his agony as well as mine. Wow, mark that. So what's she saying?
Taking it off doesn't do anything, everyone already knows.
Say it. Is that Jennifer? No. Who was saying that? Yeah, go ahead, Sydney.
I said taking it off wouldn't do anything, everyone already knows.
Yeah, it's already too deeply branded. And what does she mean by this? I would that I might endure his agony as well as mine. What does she wish?
That all of the pains
Yeah, that his pain could be hers as well. Why would she say something like that? Why is she not given a name? She loves him. She loves him, right? Heart wants what it wants. Okay. Speak, woman, said another voice coldly, sternly. Speak and give your child a father. It's not told to you, but that is her husband speaking from the crowd. Okay? Hawthorne doesn't tell us everything, so sometimes I gotta fill in the gaps, okay? She will not speak. Oh, she says no, the child's gonna have to know her heavenly father. She's not gonna know an earthly one. Now highlight this paragraph. It starts with, she will not speak, murmured Mr. Dimsdale, who leaning over the balcony with his hand upon his heart, had awaited the result of his appeal. He drew back with a long sigh, long respiration. Wondrous strength and generosity of a woman's heart, she will not speak. Okay, so some interesting behavior here. We have her minister who seems reluctant to question her. And when he does, he says, you can speak the name of your fellow sinner and fellow sufferer. Okay, that's kind of interesting. And then when she says, no, never, he says she has a generous heart. Okay? All right, I need y'all to pick up wherever it was that you left off and use the next, 8-9 minutes and read. Just get a few pages behind you. You'll be glad you did, okay? Because this is definitely something you got to take in small doses. Now, I would suggest that y'all get the Audible and listen to it while you read, but you gotta, mark it as you go. Don't just try to listen to it because you're probably gonna fall asleep. All right, you gotta be more active as you read this. It really does take all you got, okay? So that's my suggestion. Why don't y'all get a couple of pages in and I'll get some work done up here too, okay? All right.